Will Cuylle has made the New York Rangers. Brennan Othmann has been sent to the Hartford Wolfpack, and Ben Harpur and Jonny Brodzinski each clear waivers. All this and much, much more on today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 914 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So within the past 24 hours are here, Rangers basically, finalizing their roster to start the season. And obviously a couple of last minute moves here. You had Will Cuylle making the team. That's kind of the headline grabber. And certainly we're going to talk about Will Cuylle in today's episode. You also had Brennan Othmann being sent down to the Hartford Wolfpack. So he'll start the season there. And quite possible we see him during the season at some point. And then you also had Jonny Brodzinski, Ben Harpur, both placed on waivers for the purposes of sending them to the Wolfpack. I was a little bit nervous there. I like both players. I mean, look, if one of them gets claimed, is it going to completely ruin the season for the Rangers? No, but I think they're both useful players and, two personal favorites of mine. So I'm glad they're still in the Rangers system and they can get called back up to the Rangers on an as-needed basis. But we got to start with the man of the hour, and I say that's Will Cuylle. He came into training camp very hungry. That's the thing that really kind of stands out to me. He basically took advantage of every opportunity he got. The Rangers tended to move him around the lineup a little bit. He got some run, even the top six. He ends up playing in 5 preseason games. Only him and Brennan Othmann played in 5. Everybody else is 4 or less. So the Rangers clearly wanted to see what they had in those two players. And they both look good. But Will Cuylle, man, he kicked the door down, scored a couple of goals, played some very physical hockey, and obviously impressed the coaching staff. Pierre Laviolette has spoken very highly of him. And Laviolette doesn't just give out compliments like it's Halloween, Halloween candy or anything like that. You got to earn it. And clearly he did. Clearly he turned some heads, got the attention of the coaching staff, and now he makes the New York Rangers. And a lot to unpack here as far as Cuylle and what kind of role he's going to play and how long of a leash he'll have. Will he be in the NHL for good? Will he ever go back to the AHL? We're going to get to all that. First of all, though, I wanted to just kind of look at his stats from the preseason. As I mentioned, you just use the eye test. He was very impressive. But in the preseason, once again, 5 games, the Rangers wanted to get a good long look at him. They got it. They liked what they saw, enough to give him a spot on the opening night roster. And Cuylle, in those 5 games, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points, a +1. He was tied with Jonny Brodzinski and Mika Zibanejad for a team-high 12 shots on goal during the preseason. Cuylle could have easily ended up with more than 2 goals this preseason. There were a handful of opportunities where he just missed, a couple of shots from the slot, high danger scoring areas. There was also 1 or 2 instances where he was there in the crease. It's another thing you gotta like about Cuylle. He'll go to the net, he'll set up shop there, almost like a mini Kreider. Obviously trying to create some traffic in front of the goaltender, look for maybe a deflection, and clean up some loose change in the crease, which he was able to do on 1 occasion. But there were 2 other times where he was right there looking for that stuffing goal and just wasn't quite able to do it. Either the goalie made a tough save or he couldn't quite elevate his shot enough. But there, again, he was in the mix. And like I said, he could have ended up easily with a lot more goals than he ended up getting. He got 2. He could have had 4 or 5 if everything kind of bounced his way. So Cuylle with a really strong preseason. And as far as what he did last year, he was with the Wolfpack, 69 games, 25 goals, 20 assists, 45 points. It was a +10, and then a goal and 2 assists in 9 playoff games where he was also a -2. You guys will also remember, had a brief run with the Rangers last year, 4 games, no points, was also a -2, and got into 2 fights. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he won both of them, or at least was very competitive in both fights. And obviously the big thing there, it's not so much whether you win them or not. I mean, I'm sure it's nice to win an NHL fight rather than lose it. I'm sure that feels a lot better. But the big thing for me is just showing the willingness to do that and to stand up for his teammates. And I'm sure that made a favorable impression on all the Ranger players and the coaching staff as well. As far as what kind of a role we can expect from Will Cuylle and how they're going to slot him in at the start of the season here, again, I'm not completely against the idea of him starting on the fourth line. It's not my personal choice. I would like to see him out there on the third line, but let me just present the reasons why. If the Rangers start him on the fourth line, which is possible, I don't think it's what they'll do, but it is possible. Opening night, first couple of games, he's a fourth liner. Here's why we shouldn't lose our minds if that happens. First of all, he plays a very physical game, and he wouldn't be out of place playing a fourth liner style early in his NHL career. Secondly, he is a former third round pick. It's not like this is a former first overall pick, second overall pick, third overall pick, where, you're really going to stifle their development and you're expecting like point per game production. I mean, Will Cuylle could become that player. It's at least possible. But third round picks, I mean, for the most part, you're not looking at somebody that's going to be point per game. And obviously there are exceptions to that over the years and all the different draft classes. But again, you're not stifling the development of a Connor McDavid or a Sidney Crosby or an Alex Ovechkin, one of these guys that like went first overall. Will Cuylle, he's got some offensive prowess for sure, but also a very physical player. So I don't think it's like an absolute must to keep him away from the fourth line. Again, my preference is the third line, but the fourth line I think would be acceptable. And I just don't think we have to lose our minds if he does start on the fourth line. The other thing is, if he starts on the fourth line, you're kind of, easing him into it. I mean, he played a handful of games last season, but you're not putting too much on his plate right from the get-go. And I like the idea of a player kind of climbing the depth chart over time rather than sliding down it. And, you start him on the second line. Some people want him out there with Panarin or whatever it might be. If he doesn't deliver right away, he's going to be going down the lineup. Putting him on the fourth line, he can work his way up over time. Once again, having said all that, I do prefer Cuylle on the third line. I wanted to make the case for both, but third line is my preference. If we assume that everybody is going to be healthy, then it's not like there's anybody that like Cuylle would be taking their spot. And, oh man, somebody that drops down to the fourth line is like, oh, that guy has to be in a top 9 role. Like, think of the fourth liners that would be on this team if Will Cuylle is on the third line. You got to figure it's going to be Bonino, it's going to be Goodrow, and it's going to be one or the other between Vesey and Pitlick. Maybe those guys at times can play top 9. I mean, it's fine. We've seen all of them do it at one time or another throughout their career. But do any of them have to be in the top line? Or the top 9 rather? No, absolutely not. So Cuylle, by putting him in the top 9, he's not really taking anybody's spot. And if you're going to make this bold of a decision to run with Will Cuylle here and give him this roster spot against all odds, then might as well just roll with it. Give him some significant ice time. I think third line is a good place for him to start. And if he delivers, if he outperforms some people that are in front of him, once again, you can always move him up the lineup as time goes by here and the season, develops. What else did I want to talk about here as far as Cuylle? So I wanted to mention this too, because, I see people saying that like, oh man, the Rangers, they're too old now. And why did they bring in all these veterans? All the veterans that the Rangers brought in are guys on 1-year contracts who are not expected to be superstar players. You've got Bonino, who's older. He's 35. Pitlick's not that old, but he's like 31. You've got Jonathan Quick, obviously 37. He's the backup goalie. Blake Wheeler's 37, but just a shade over the league minimum for Blake Wheeler. I don't see how you can say no to that, but I think it's okay. And I think the Rangers are in a good spot as far as a mix of veterans and young guys. You've got the kid line, and pretty soon the kid line, we're not going to be able to call them that anymore, because not only are they getting older, but you're going to have guys like Cuylle on this roster. Eventually Brennan Othmann is going to be there. They're going to be younger than the kid line of Hito, Lafreniere, and Kakko. So that nickname is either going to have to be passed on to Othmann and Cuylle and whoever else, or just retired altogether. But again, I like the construction of this team as it pertains to having some vets, having some young guys, and some guys that are right there in the middle. A lot of the Ranger star players and their highest paid players, late 20s, early 30s, somewhere in that area. And there's people talking about like, oh, they missed their window. I mean, who among this Ranger core is old? Kreider is probably he is the oldest as far as like the star players are concerned, and he's 32. So the Rangers are gonna have a couple more cracks at it. And like I said, you put Cuylle there, gives you some youthful exuberance into the lineup. And again, just like the mix of the veterans and the young guys that this team has. I also wanted to point this out. If anybody's wondering, what might happen if, say, Will Cuylle struggles in the NHL, and, the Rangers give him some time, but 10, 15 games into the season, he just doesn't quite have it yet. He's not playing all that well. And you decide that, okay, he could use some more seasoning in the AHL. Can you then send him down without him being exposed to waivers? The answer to that question is yes. That will be the case for the foreseeable future. So there's a lot of factors that determine how many games you have to play in the NHL before you are no longer waiver exempt. Basically, the earlier you sign your entry level contract, the more NHL games that you can play before you stop being waiver exempt. And going by a chart that I was able to find as far as, waiver exemptions and whatnot, my understanding is that because Will Cuylle signed his ELC when he was 19 years old, he will remain waiver exempt until he plays 160 NHL games or after he plays 4 seasons in the NHL, whichever one of those two things comes first. So either way, it's going to take a while for Will Cuylle to hit either one of those milestones. And if he struggles, you can always make that move. You can always send him back down. Okay, let's have him build himself back up, put him on the top line with the Wolfpack. Let him, produce some points, do his thing down there, be one of the best players on the ice. And then when he's ready, you call him back up. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully he just hits the ground running with the Rangers and never looks back, never plays another game for the Hartford Wolfpack. But that move is there. It's in the Rangers' back pocket if they feel like they need to do it at one time or another. And then finally, as far as the Will Cuylle situation and him making the team, I'd like to also give the Rangers a little bit of credit too. Sometimes teams can be stubborn. They go into training camp and the preseason with an idea of, okay, this guy's going to make the team and that guy's going to be in that role and this guy's going to be over here and this guy's going to start the season in the minors no matter what he does in the preseason. The Rangers didn't do that, and they tend not to do that. We have seen many examples, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we've seen many examples of the Rangers rolling with some of their young prospects earlier as opposed to later. Guys like, you think about the defenseman, Keandre Miller comes to mind. He was a surprise opening night roster member a couple of years ago, back when he made his debut, I think 3 years ago now at this point. Braden Schneider, not last year, but the year before, being called up midseason. He was very young when that happened. Obviously, Kako and Lafreniere skipped the AHL altogether. Filipino was I think he was 18, but he couldn't have been older than 19 when he made his NHL debut. So they will, if you do your thing in training camp in the preseason and or with the Hartford Wolfpack, if you don't make the team out of camp, the Rangers will give you your chance if you earn it. So again, that's another example of this here. I get the feeling going into camp, they weren't expecting Will Cuylle to be on the opening night roster, but he played very well. He was hungry. He wanted it. He went out and he earned it. And the Rangers reward him once again with an opening night roster spot. To keep everything rolling in just a second here, I want to go ahead and turn our attention to Brennan Othmann. I know there were some Ranger fans who really wanted to see him start the season with the Rangers as well. I think they made the right decision starting him with the Hartford Wolfpack. We'll talk about that in a second. Also going to talk about Jonny Brodzinski, Ben Harpur, each clearing waivers. We're going to do all that good stuff in just a second here. But first, gotta let everybody know, today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Sleeper. The NHL season is finally here. Will the Vegas Golden Knights reign supreme again? I love the NHL, and I know you do too. That's why I want to tell you all about Sleeper. Sleeper is my go-to platform for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you have the chance to win 100 times your cash on daily fantasy. The NHL has never been more exciting than it is now with star players like McDavid, Ovechkin, Panarin, and Makar, or stars from all around the league. Simply select more or less based on their stats such as goals, assists, points, saves, and more. Yes, you heard me, Ranger fans. Sleeper offers 100 times payouts, so start paying attention, make the right picks, and you could win big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you will get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. I just want to thank everybody, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And for the everydayers, definitely stick around. We got a couple of guests lined up for you guys this upcoming week. Very much looking forward to that. And hey, we're less than a week away from New York Ranger hockey starting. So if you're not excited about that, check your pulse. It's going to be a lot of fun seeing this team get back to it, especially after what was obviously a disappointing season this past year. Hopefully this team comes back with a vengeance. For right now, let's go ahead and shift our attention to Brennan Othmann. He heads to the Hartford Wolfpack. He will be making his Wolfpack debut when they start their season. Othmann, obviously a former first-round pick by the Rangers, 20 years old. Again, I know there were some Ranger fans that really wanted to see him break camp with this team. And, again, there's people that want to throw him out there on Panarin's line. And, when the time comes and when they decide that Brennan Othmann is ready and he gets the call up, if he plays well enough, I think that could be a lot of fun, him being out there on the same line as Artemi Panarin. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And for right now, like I said, I do think it's the right decision to have Othmann begin the season with the Hartford Wolfpack. There were some preseason games here, and again, he played 5 games. Him and Will Cuylle, the only 2 Rangers to play 5 games in this preseason. Some of those games, he really stood out, played very physical, got on the score sheet a couple of times as well. There were some other games, namely these last 2, where I don't think he was quite as noticeable. And if you want to just go through his preseason stats real quick, 5 games, 2 goals. He was a +4, 6 shots on goal during that time. And the OHL stats, I mean, we've gone over these in the past, but I think it's worth taking a look at again because they're just ridiculous. This past year, 56 games between the Flint Firebirds and the Peterborough Petes, once again of the OHL, 29 goals, 38 assists. So he had 67 points in 56 games. Then in the playoffs, 8 goals and 17 assists in 23 games. So he's a heck of a player. And the year before that, 97 points in 66 games. Just wild video game-like stuff. And somebody that I think has a bright future in this league. As far as him versus Cuylle, again, it just made more sense to me for Cuylle to be the guy that gets this opportunity first before Othmann. Once again, we saw Cuylle play mostly the entire year last year with the Hartford Wolfpack. We also saw Cuylle, play 4 games with the New York Rangers. And so he's obviously gotten some pro hockey experience under his belt. So he's kind of got the inside track. Brennan Othmann has not played any pro hockey. He's been in the OHL, but I think, starting the season with the Wolfpack, that's the way to go. If he goes and he absolutely just rips it up in the AHL and there's nothing left for him to do, then by all means call him up sooner rather than later. But I'll feel a little bit better. We've seen some Ranger forwards get fast-tracked to the NHL. As I mentioned earlier, mixed results when it comes to that. The Rangers kind of rushing guys. It seems like they do better. Like if they rush a defenseman to the NHL, it seems to work better than when they rush a forward to the NHL. I think recent history will kind of tell you that. But yeah, I mean, Othmann, let him do his thing in the AHL. Let him hopefully be the star player there on the top line, the whole 9 yards. He can be a heck of a player there and obviously build his confidence. And eventually, when the time is right, you give him that call, whether that's an injury to somebody on the Rangers, whether that's somebody not playing well on the Rangers, whether that's, the team just needing a spark, whatever it might be. I think sooner or later, you will see Brennan Othmann with this New York Ranger team at some point this season. And as far as him versus Cuylle, Cooley's more ready now. I think maybe Othmann has a little bit more long-term upside. But either way, Ranger fans should be excited about both these players. You've got other prospects. I mean, they're not ready for the NHL yet, but you've got Adam Sikora, you've got Gabe Perreault, 2 high draft picks from the last couple of years here, very skilled players. And that's why, when Ranger fans will sometimes say, oh man, there's nothing in the pipeline, they don't have any prospects. You sure about that? I mean, these are 4 forwards that are very talented and have put up big time numbers in the various leagues that they've played in. So I wouldn't be too quick to count out the Rangers farm system right now. I think there's some good players on the way, specifically when it comes to forwards. But like I said, err on the side of caution. I'd rather Brennan Othmann spend a little bit more time than is necessary in the AHL rather than rush him to the NHL and get him here too early. His head's spinning. He's an ineffective player, and you end up having to send him right back down anyway. So let him build his confidence in the AHL. And Brennan Othmann, we will see you a little bit later this season. Also want to talk about Jonny Brodzinski and Ben Harpur. The 2 of them were placed on waivers, and I was keeping my fingers crossed that they would get through. They both did. I like both of these players. Again, not superstars, but anytime Jonny Brodzinski is up with the Rangers, it seems like, he plays very hard. He's got an element of speed. He's not afraid to shoot the puck. I mean, he doesn't have a ton of shots on goal per game, but per minute on the ice, he certainly does. So that's nice to see. He can kill some penalties for you. We even saw him on the Panarin line for a very brief time last year. It was only like a game or 2 tops. But he's somebody that can come up here and certainly not hurt you. Not a superstar player, but not hurt you if he's in the lineup. And the other thing, too, with Jonny Brodzinski, he's the captain of the Hartford Wolfpack. I think they like him in that role. They think he's a good influence on some of the young players down there. So let him do that. I'm glad he made it through waivers. I'm glad the Hartford Wolfpack did not lose their captain. And again, if there's a situation later this year where the Rangers need to call him up, you need a veteran, whatever the case might be, Jonny Brodzinski will be there. We'll see. I mean, I know more people are going to want Othmann than Brodzinski, but I like Brodzinski, somebody with some NHL experience, somebody that's a good leader for the AHL team. I'm glad he's still here in the organization. As for Ben Harpur, I mean, to me, it's just kind of a feel-good and interesting story because he was pretty much left for dead. He took a PTO with the Hartford Wolfpack this past season. Wasn't even a guarantee to make the Hartford Wolfpack. He made the team, played well there, basically just kind of worked his way up the ranks, was able to claim that sixth defenseman spot last year for the Rangers when neither Libor Hajek nor Zach Jones could, and they kind of just ran with him for a while. Now, obviously, the trade for Tarasenko and Mikkola, that pushed Harpur out of the lineup. And right now, just kind of a numbers thing, because they want Gustafsson, I would imagine, to be the sixth defenseman on opening night. You've got Zach Jones. You can't send him down to the minors. They're not going to risk putting him on waivers right now because there's a decent chance he would be claimed. So Harpur just kind of the odd man out. It's not really anything that he did wrong, but he gets through waivers and still has 2 years left on his contract. Just a big physical defenseman and somebody that watches out for his teammates. So for all those reasons, I like Brodzinski. I like Harpur. I'm glad they're both still here. And again, you can call them back up on an as-needed basis. But, you know, the thing with Cuylle, he had to make it, like, you couldn't let your fear of losing Brodzinski on waivers make you, you know, not have Will Cuylle on this opening night roster after he clearly earned a position. And that's nothing against Brodzinski. He had a nice preseason too. But man, Will Cuylle going out there, kicking the door down. And obviously the Rangers have big plans for him, former third-round pick, and he's here. And like I said, hopefully he just hits the ground running and never plays another game for the Hartford Wolfpack. Yeah, again, I'm glad those two players made it through waivers. Also very curious to see if the Rangers end up claiming anyone on waivers from some other team. As of this recording, they have not done so, but we'll obviously keep our eye on that going forward here. I'm going to keep everything rolling in just a second here. I want to talk a little bit about seemingly one of the last position battles for opening night. Jimmy Vesey or Tyler Pitlick? Who is the 12th forward? Who will the Rangers go with? Who should they go with? And how will that situation play out over the course of this season? We'll get to all that stuff in just a second. First, though, gotta let everybody know, today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's go ahead, keep everything rolling here. I want to kind of wrap up today's episode by talking a little bit about Vesey versus Pitlick. Also going to take a look at the two power play units for the Rangers. I'm going to do my picks for who I think, which players should make up those two units and just kind of give my reasoning there. First, though, Vesey versus Pitlick. So, you know, kind of a ripple effect of Will Cuylle making this team is that it's probably going to squeeze. I mean, it either has to be Vesey or Pitlick out of the lineup. I can't imagine it would be anybody else. Got to think Bonino is going to be in there. I know some people are all over Lafreniere and they want to trade him and do this and do that. Lafreniere is going to be out there on opening night. So, yeah, it's one of those two that's going to be odd man out. Let me just say real quick, too, I would not 100% rule out the possibility of Will Cuylle perhaps being a healthy scratch on opening night. I would not do this. I would not be in favor of this. I would not like this. And I don't think it's what the Rangers will end up doing. But I would leave that door just cracked. You know, maybe there's a situation where Laviolette just wants to give a nod to the two veterans kind of out of respect. And Will Cuylle can watch the first game from the press box and work his way into the lineup in due time, likely as soon as the second game. That's a remote possibility. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't want it to happen, but I'll at least toss it out there as being a possibility. I think Will Cuylle is going to be out there on the third line on opening night. As far as Vesey versus Pitlick, could really go either way. Coming into training camp, I would have said that I think Jimmy Vesey would probably be the 12th forward. Tyler Pitlick would probably be your healthy scratch. I think I would still kind of lean that way. Obviously, I've seen more of Jimmy Vesey over the years than Tyler Pitlick. But to me, you know, Jimmy Vesey had a solid season for the Rangers last year. Not a superstar player or anything like that, but a good penalty killer, a gritty player. He'll get in your face, a good defensive forward, and somebody that seems to be very well liked in the locker room as well. Has Pitlick done enough this preseason to kind of unseat Jimmy Vesey? I'm not so sure he has. Although by that same token, you got a new coaching staff, so nobody really needs to unseat anybody. It's kind of an open competition for that job. And again, you could make a case for either one of them. Also of note here, Jimmy Vesey can play left wing or right wing. Pitlick plays mostly right wing, can also play some center. I don't think the Rangers would ever really need him at center. They have a lot of centers. For me, it should still be Jimmy Vesey, but I've kind of just been picking up on some things during the preseason and training camp. It feels like in the mind of Laviolette and maybe in the Ranger coaching staff that Pitlick just barely is a little bit ahead of Jimmy Vesey. And part of the reason for that, you just look at the line combinations the team has rolled with preseason, training camp, the whole 9 yards. It seems like Tyler Pitlick is being given bigger roles and perhaps even a little bit more opportunity than Jimmy Vesey, at least thus far. And when you look at practice, the line combinations from earlier today, and by the way, Lafreniere missed today's practice. He's day-to-day with an upper body injury. But, obviously he's going to be in the mix. But, you got a top line left to right of Kreider, Mika, Kakko. Second line of Panarin, Hedl, and Cuylle. Third line of Vesey, Trocheck, and Wheeler. Fourth line of Goodrow, Bonino, and Pitlick. Now, at first glance, you see that Jimmy Vesey is ahead of Tyler Pitlick in the depth chart. He's on the third line, Pitlick's on the fourth line, and you think like, okay, maybe Vesey's got the inside track here after all. But then you think about it, and Lafreniere was out of practice. Cuylle was on the second line right wing. That's probably Lafreniere's spot when he's healthy. That probably would move Will Cuylle down to third line left wing, and that's where Jimmy Vesey is. And then the fourth line is Goodrow, Bonino, Pitlick, which they might be purposely leaving that line intact because that's going to be the fourth line on opening night, and Jimmy Vesey will be the odd man out. So if I'm making a prediction, I think Pitlick gets the call and not Jimmy Vesey. Vesey's a healthy scratch on opening night. My personal preference, I would do the exact opposite. I would have Jimmy Vesey out there as kind of the 12th forward and Tyler Pitlick as the healthy scratch. And look, whoever it is, none of them should be a healthy scratch for like 10 or 12 straight games. You can always rotate a little bit. You can, move Vesey and Pitlick in and out of the lineup. And hey, whoever plays better, and if the Rangers start winning, that's your guy. That's your 12th forward, going into the season. The only other thing I want to mention here, the power play units. So these are my personal picks. It's not necessarily what I'm predicting is going to happen. It's just my personal picks for what I'd like to see as far as the Ranger power play units are concerned to start the season. For the top power play, I'm going Panarin, I'm going Mika, I'm going Kreider, I'm going Fox, and I'm going Filip Chytil in place of Vincent Trocheck. So to kind of break this thing down, a couple of talking points from this unit that I want to go with here. I would actually go with Artemi Panarin on the left side and Mika Zibanejad on the right side. Now, you might hear that and think like, well, Mika Zibanejad, why would you not want him on the left side? He can just, bombs away with those one-timers. He can rip slap shots with the best of them. That's just it, though. The Rangers in this preseason and at times last season as well, and by the way, the Rangers went 1 for 21, I believe it was, on the power play this preseason. It feels like they've become too set on just feeding the puck to Mika Zibanejad and living and dying by his one-timers. Now, of course, Mika Zibanejad has an awesome shot. So, yeah, you should work that into your power play in one way or another. But, when you've got Chris Kreider as a net front presence and you've got Panarin who can do it all and create something out of nothing and make all these ridiculous passes. You got Adam Fox, who's a great passer as well. You've got, Filip Chytil's out there. Obviously, he can shoot the puck. There's just too many threats and too many options to continue to just go to that same well of trying to feed Mika Zibanejad one-timers. And if you put Panarin on the left side and Mika on the right side, you can still get Mika some one-timers, obviously, but it just kind of makes you step out of your comfort zone a little bit. It makes you try some other things. I think the power play becomes a little bit more instinctive, a little bit more free-flowing, rather than just feed Mika for a one-timer, feed Mika for a one-timer, feed Mika for a one-timer. Let's mix things up a little bit. And on top of that, Panarin on the left side, I think that's where he's at his best too. So you can always go back. You can always flip-flop it in the middle of the season or whatever, but teams are starting to really key on that Mika Zibanejad one-timer. We saw, I think it was the Devils have a breakaway because they anticipated that pass. Panarin tried to make the pass to Mika for the one-timer, and they knew it was coming, and they stole the puck, and they went in on a breakaway, did not score, but teams are all over that right now. So to me, let's mix it up a little bit. Panarin on the left side, Mika on the right side. As for Filip Chytil on the top unit over Vincent Trocheck, part of this for me, honestly, is let's just give this a shot. Obviously, Chytil coming off of a strong season, his best season in the NHL. This is a way to just continue to bolster his confidence and give him more opportunities and make him hopefully become the player that the Rangers ultimately want him to be. He still has some upside, and I think his best season is probably about to happen right now. I think he'll top this season what he did last season, and a way to do that and just kind of, force that to happen is to put him on the top unit. Second unit, we're going to go Trocheck, Wheeler, Kakko, Lafreniere, and Gustafsson. So if we put Hedl on the top unit, as we've done here, then Trocheck is kind of the odd man out as far as that quintet is concerned. We still want him on the power play, though, and we can put him here on the second power play. And the reason I like this is now you have a top power play unit where Mika Zibanejad can take faceoffs. Mika's, solid on faceoffs. He's about 50% for his career, has gotten better as the years have gone on. And now you've got Trocheck taking faceoffs on the second power play unit instead of Philip Hedl doing it. And Trocheck was like 57% win percentage on the faceoffs last year. That was a weird way to say it, but I think you get the idea. And Philip Hedl was like around 40%. That's a big difference. And you always want to win faceoffs. Peter Laviolette recently talked about he puts a lot of stock into winning faceoffs. But when you're on the power play or shorthanded for that matter, it just becomes that much more important. So to me, I like Trocheck taking faceoffs here on the second unit. And this is one way to make sure that happens. The other thing, too, that might have stood out here, I'm going Gustafsson over both Miller and Trouba as far as the second power play unit is concerned. Rangers have a lot of options when it comes to offensive forwards and guys that can play on the power play, but Gustafsson has looked really good in this preseason. The Rangers right now are learning a new system. Apparently, Gustafsson was helping Zach Jones with some things in practice a little bit earlier today, so that's nice to hear that he's obviously being a good teammate with the guy he's competing for a position with, so that's obviously very cool. But, again, Rangers are going through a learning curve right now. They're trying to learn a new system. Erik Gustafsson, very, very familiar. I mean, it was just 1 year, but still very familiar. More familiarity with Laviolette than anybody else on this Ranger team. So take advantage of that. Let him do one of the things that's one of his strengths, being a quarterback on the power play. And, Miller and Trouba, you can use them. Obviously, they're going to play a lot 5v5, and you can also go to them quite a bit on the penalty kill as well. And you can always make changes there. I'm sure at some point we'll see Miller on one of the power plays. Trouba sooner or later. I'm sure he'll get a chance. But right now, I'm going with Gustafsson as a defenseman on that second unit there. The only other debate here, Lafreniere or Cuylle on this power play. I thought about going Cuylle over Lafreniere, but I don't want Ranger Twitter to riot, so we'll go with Lafreniere. No, the real reason, look, Lafreniere, not an impressive preseason. A lot of Rangers did not have impressive preseasons. We're not going to leave him for dead. He is the former first overall pick. He has shown flashes here and there. And if you want to get him going, you got to give him some opportunities. And with Will Cuylle, again, he's about to play his 5th career NHL game. Let's not put too much on his plate right off the bat. These things are always subject to change. But for right now, Lafreniere makes the cut as far as being out there on the second power play unit. Figure we can pretty much call it there. We are about 24 hours, almost on the dot away from our fantasy hockey draft for Locked On New York Rangers. So anybody that's in the league, the draft is at Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Reach out to me if you have any questions, and we will have a lot of fun, talk some hockey, and draft our teams for this upcoming season. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time.